Episode 1. The First Drop. I should have never gone down there. The old chapel beneath St. Aurelius Monastery was sealed for a reason. But curiosity is a louder preacher than faith. It started with a sound faint, wet, and steady. I followed it through a narrow stairwell that smelled of dust and forgotten prayers, until I reached a door blackened with age. Carved into its wood were words in Latin I didn't recognize, but my hand moved anyway, pressing it open. They hit me first, cold, damp, and sweet, like old wine left to rot. Inside, the altar stood alone in the center of the room, draped in crimson cloth that had long since stiffened, and on it lay a book. No title, no gold leaf, just leather, dark and cracked like old skin. I told myself it was just another relic, but relics don't bleed. The sound grew, louder, drip, drip. I stepped closer. My fingers brushed the book, and for a moment, I swore it pulsed beneath my hand like a living thing. And then I heard it read. The voice wasn't loud. It was almost kind, as if it had been waiting centuries for someone to answer. My mouth moved before I could stop it, shaping words I didn't know. Dominus illuminatio me. The first drop fell. Blood real. Warm blood slid down the altar's edge and splashed onto the floor. I stumbled back, but it didn't stop. The crimson trail snaked across the stone, curling into letters that formed one terrible word. Continue. The voice returned, louder this time, almost pleading. Finish the psalm, or it will finish you. I ran up the stairs, through the cold halls of the monastery. My heart thundered in my chest, but even as I reached my room, I could still hear its soft, patient, and relentless whispering from beneath the floorboards. And when I looked at my hands, they weren't clean. A thin smear of blood traced every fingertip. I should have gone to the abbot. I should have confessed. But some part of me God helped me wanted to go back. Because just before I slammed the chapel door behind me, the altar whispered my name. Episode 2. The Psalm of Silence. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the altar, again bleeding, breathing, whispering. By dawn, I convinced myself it was just exhaustion, a trick of the mind. But then I saw my hands. The blood from last night was gone, yet my fingernails were stained red, as if the psalm had seeped under the skin. I went to chapel for morning prayer, hoping ritual would drown out the memory. The candles flickered, the brothers chanted, but my ears heard only that voice. Finish it! I pressed my palms against my ears. The world went silent, and in that silence, something else spoke. Psalm 2. I frowned. After prayer, I found Sister Miriam in the library. She was old enough to remember the monastery's buried secrets, though no one dared ask her. But when she looked at me, her gaze fell to my hands, and for the briefest second, I saw fear. You touched it, she whispered. I wanted to deny it, but my throat locked. Miriam closed the book she was holding, her knuckles white. The altar binds with blood. The first psalm stains you, but the second, her voice dropped to a tremor. The second takes something away. I should have run then. Instead, I returned to the hidden chapel that night. The door opened easier this time, as if it wanted me back. The altar waited, its cloth darker, heavier with fresh stains that hadn't been there before. And the book lay open. The words glistened as if written in wet ink, though I knew it wasn't ink at all. To meanness, my lips moved without my consent. And then nothing, not silence. No, this was worse. It was as if the world itself had stopped breathing. I looked down. Blood was sliding from my palms, cooling at my feet. The psalm wasn't bleeding from the altar anymore. It was bleeding from me. A faint laugh echoed in the dark. Not cruel, not mocking, almost grateful. The second has begun. Miriam's voice hissed behind me. I turned. She was standing at the threshold, clutching a rosary so tight her fingers bled. If you speak another verse, she said, your tongue will never be yours again. But it was too late, because the altar was already whispering the next line, and it was in my voice. Episode 3. The Saint Who Screamed. The scream came just before dawn. At first, I thought it was the wind dragging its nails across the monastery walls, but then it cut through the air, a gimro, human, and buried deep beneath the floor. I bolted upright in my cell, my hands trembling. For a moment, I prayed it was a dream, but then I saw the blood, thin, fresh lines running from my palms down to the cold stone floor, as though the Psalms had carved invisible wounds while I slept. I followed the sound, barefoot, half-mad, down the stairwell where shadows swelled like living things. The hidden chapel was darker than before. The candles I'd left burned down to twisted wax corpses, and on the altar, the psalter lay open, its pages wet not with ink, but blood, glistening in the candlelight. Then I saw it. A name had been written across the altar in trembling crimson script. Saint Aurelius, the founder of this monastery, the one who vanished centuries ago. The scream came, again louder, closer. I realized then it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from under the altar. I reached out, my hand slick with fear, and pressed against the stone. Cold, solid, but then it shifted, just slightly, as if something beneath it was pushing back. Help me! I stumbled backward. The voice was faint but unmistakable. A man's voice, holy, broken, and endless. And then Sister Miriam was there, clutching my arm. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. You shouldn't have come, she rasped. He's still down there, Saint Aurelius. I whispered. She didn't answer. She only looked at the altar and made the sign of the cross with trembling fingers. He read afar, she said. He thought the Psalms would bring him closer to God, but they opened a door that never closed. Now he prays and screams. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of copper. Blood began to seep from the cracks around the altar. Slow at first, then faster, until it dripped onto my feet. He wants you to finish it, Miriam said, her voice breaking, because he can't. The scream came one last time, shaking the stones, and for a heartbeat, I swear I heard words buried inside it. Read for me, Brother Elias, or join me. The Psalter flipped its own page. The next verse bled fresh, and despite every part of me screaming to run, my lips began to move. Episode 4, the verse that wounds. I should have left the monastery that night, but faith is a chain, and I was already bound. A psalter waited for me, open on the altar as if it knew I'd return. Blood still clung to its edges, warm as if it had only just filled. Sister Miriam followed, though she wouldn't cross the chapel threshold. You don't have to do this, she whispered, her voice trembling like hymnlight, but the altar was already breathing. Hello, patient, each exhale reeked of old prayers and rotten incense. I touched the page. The words were sharp, carved into the parchment as if etched by a knife. They shimmered, not with ink, but with something darker that never dried. Dominus vulneravi me, the verse slid from my lips. Before I even realized I was speaking, pain struck like a blade. I gasped and looked down. A thin cut traced itself across my chest, shallow at first, then deeper, until blood welled up and soaked my habit. The wound mirrored the shape of a crucifix. I staggered back. The altar groaned. Miriam's rosary rattled in her hands. Every verse takes something from you, she said. The first stains, the second binds, the third. She didn't finish. She didn't have to, because I could feel it. Each drop of blood from my chest slithered toward the altar, as if the stone itself was drinking me. My vision blurred. I saw shadows moving in the walls, kneeling like silent monks, their hollow faces turned toward me. He's feeding it, Miriam hissed. The saint, he's still praying down there. And you're becoming his echo. The wound burned, my voice cracked, but I couldn't stop. The psalm was still spilling from my mouth. Syllables I didn't understand but somehow knew. And then it happened. The blood from my chest rose and dripping, not flowing, rising in midair like invisible fingers were lifting it. It gathered above the altar, trembling, then spread into words. Finish it. I fell to my knees. Miriam screamed my name, but her voice was drowned out by a choir down scenes of voices, hundreds chanting from the stones below, every word soaked in agony and devotion. I clutched my chest, gasping for air, but the wound didn't close, because I understood now. This wasn't a cut, it was an invitation, and God help me, I wanted to answer it. Episode 5, the choir that wasn't there. The first note was faint, soft as a breath in an empty room. I frowned in the dark chapel, my chest wound still burning beneath my robe. The altar stood before me, silent and heavy, but the sound came again. Singing, it was low at first, then multiplied, layered voices rising in unholy harmony. Latin words I didn't know, yet my tongue ached to join them. I turned to Miriam. Her face had gone pale. She gripped her rosary until the beads dug into her skin. "You hear it too," I whispered. Her silence was answer enough. The choir swelled, filling the chapel with impossible echoes. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere walls, floor, even the stone above us. But worst of all, it sounded beautiful. I stepped closer to the altar. That's when I saw them. Footprints. They weren't ours. Bare, human, pressed in blood, leading from the altar and vanishing into the shadow behind it. Miriam grabbed my sleeve. "Don't follow them, don't." But the voices were pulling me, each note tightened around my ribs like a rope, dragging me forward. I pressed my hand against the altar. The stone was warm. The Psalter opened on its own, pages rustling like a gasp. Blood bled from the words, dripping faster, splashing against the floor and joining the footprints. "They're not singing for him," Miriam whispered. "They're singing for it." I should have turned away. Instead, I leaned closer, and for a heartbeat, I saw them, figures kneeling in the shadows, headless monks. Their throats raw, mouths still moving in endless chant. Their voices weren't coming from their lips, but from the wounds where their heads should have been. One of them lifted its hand and pointed, not at the altar, at me. The choir stopped. The silence was worse. Blood pooled beneath my feet, circling me like a crown. The Psalter turned a page. New words bled onto it, fresh and alive. "Sin." Miriam dragged me back, her strength far greater than her frail frame should allow. The chapel door slammed shut, but even outside, the voices followed faint, sweet, and patient. And that night, as I lay in my cell, I dreamed of a choir I couldn't see and woke to find bloody footprints leading to my bed. Episode 6, The Psalm of Hunger. The first death came during Vespers. Brother Matthias was leading the chant, his voice steady but hollow. When it happened, one misplaced word on syllable sung rung in the air and the chapel turned to ice. The choir began, "Now ours." The other one, the unseen one. Their voices rose from beneath the floor, weaving through the stone like a swarm of locusts. It was beautiful. It was unbearable. Matthias frowned, his mouth trembling, his eyes wide with terror. And then, they took him. His shadow peeled off the floor like it had been waiting all along. It twisted, stretched, and wrapped around him. He didn't scream. He couldn't. The hand had stolen his voice. We all watched as his body collapsed, empty, while his shadow sank into the cracks of the chapel and vanished. When it was over, only silence remained. I couldn't breathe. None of us could. Sister Miriam gripped my arm hard enough to hurt. "It's the Psalm of Hunger," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It feeds on mistakes. That's why it wants us to keep singing." I looked down at Matthias' body. His lips were still moving, silently mouthing the words he'd sung wrong. Blood seeped from his ears like a final offering. That night, I returned to the hidden chapel alone. The altar waited for me, glowing faintly in the dark, as if it had been drinking the very life that had been taken. The Psalter was open to a new page. Fresh words bled across the parchment. "At Pascator, let it be fed." I slammed the book shut. My chest wound ached, hot and deep, as if the psalm itself was inside me now, gnawing. And then I heard it, the choir again, softer this time, gentle, almost coaxing. "Sing for us, Elias," it whispered. I clutched the altar, my fingernails breaking against the stone. "What are you?" The blood on the page rippled like water. A single word formed in red. "Hungry." Something moved behind me. I turned. Matthias was standing there, or what was left of him, his face hollow, his eyes black pits, his mouth open in a soundless and as he stepped toward me, his shadow reached first. Episode 7, The Covenant of Blood. Matthias should have been dead, yet there he stood, skin pale, lips split in a silent hymn, his hollow eyes locked on me, his shadow stretched across the chapel floor. Too long, too sharp, reaching for my feet like it wanted to drag me down with him. "Elias." The voice wasn't his. It came from everywhere, from the altar, from the blood, from the choir that wasn't there. "Offer it, or be offered." I stumbled back, but the altar's pull was stronger. The Psalter flipped its own page, and fresh words bled across the parchment in jagged script. "Covenant of Blood." Sister Miriam appeared at the doorway, her face pale with terror. "Don't read it," she rasped. If you make the covenant, there's no undoing it. But I already knew. I could feel the wound on my chest pulse, as if the verse carved into me was alive. The choir began again, soft and sweet, the sound of 8,000 dead throats singing one command. Give. Matthias took another step. His shadow slithered ahead of him, curling around the altar's base. Miriam clutched her rosary so tightly her hands bled. It doesn't want your soul, she whispered. Not yet. It wants proof. I looked down at my palms, at the blood that had marked me since the first psalm. And for the first time, I understood. The altar didn't just feed, it bargained. Slowly, I placed my hand on the psalter. The letters writhed like worms beneath my touch. But I didn't pull away. If I give you this, I said, my voice shaking, you leave me alive. The blood on the page moved, forming a single word. Yours. I bit my thumb until it split. The taste of iron sharp on my tongue. My blood hit the page, and the chapel went black. The choir screamed, not in hunger, in joy. And when the candles flared back to life, Matthias was gone. Only his shadow remained, burned into the stone at the altar's base like a permanent stain. Miriam's voice trembled. You've bound yourself to it now. I didn't answer, because deep down, I already knew. The psalm was no longer asking me to read it. It was waiting for me to finish it. Episode 8, the prayer that opens graves. That night I bled on the altar. I thought I had given it everything. I was wrong. The psalter opened by itself, pages fluttering like frantic wings, until it stopped on a verse written in ink so dark, it looked like a shadow burned into the parchment. Oratio tua sepulchre aperit, the prayer that opens graves. I should have walked away, but my chest wound pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't mine, and my lips began to move before I could stop them. The words spilled out, low and trembling, and that chapel shook. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard its fingernails dragging against stone, from beneath the floor, from behind the altar, from everywhere the dead had ever been laid. Miriam grabbed my arm. Stop, Elias, she cried. You don't know what that verse does. But I couldn't. Each syllable left my mouth like a hook tearing out of my throat. And then I heard it. The sound of soil splitting. The ground behind the altar cracked. Bleeding dark earth. From it rose a hand, pale, thin, fingernails blackened. Then another, and another. The choir returned at this time louder, triumphant, singing in a language that made my bones ache. Miriam screamed as the first body dragged itself from the ground. Its face was caved in, its hollow sockets fixed on me, but it didn't lurch forward. It knelt. Elias, it whispered. Its voice was broken glass, yet unmistakable. It was Brother Matthias, and he wasn't alone. Dozens of them crawled up from the earthly priests, forgotten monks, sisters with their rosaries still clutched in skeletal hands. They didn't attack. They didn't speak. They only knelt, forming a circle around the altar. One by one, they placed their hands on the stone. Their bloodless fingers left stains that spread like ink until the altar looked alive. The psalter turned its own page again. New words appeared in blood. Finish what they could not. Miriam's voice was trembling now. Elias, if you keep reading, it won't be graves that open next. The corpses bowed their heads. The choir howled in unholy worship. And for the first time, I wondered if I was praying to the wrong God. Episode 9, the midnight mass of the dead. They came for me at midnight, not with chains, not with force, but with silence. The corpses that had risen from the earth no longer knelt by the altar. They stood, now watching, waiting. Their hollow eyes glimmered faintly, as though some ember of devotion still burned inside them. Brother Matthias was at their head. His lips, cracked and bloodless, formed my name without sound. He raised one skeletal hand and pointed to the floor beneath the altar. The stone split open. Steps, black as coal and wet with blood, spiraled downward. From below came the sound of chanting, hundreds of voices locked in one endless song. Miriam gripped my sleeve. Don't follow them, Elias. If you go down there, you won't come back. But I was already moving. The dead parted from me like a congregation making way for their priest. Their shadows trailed across the chapel walls. Too long, too sharp, bending in ways shadows shouldn't. I descended. The air grew colder with every step. The walls bled scripturate in verses etched in red, still wet, as though the stone itself had been carved by living veins. and then I saw it, a cathedral beneath the earth, candles made of bone-lined dials, their flames black and writhing. The altar was vast and alive, pulsing like a heart, and around it, the dead sang, not in despair, not in torment, in worship. Matthias turned to me. His voice was a rasp of earth and ash. You are the covenant, Elias. You opened the graves. Now you must lead the mass. The Psalter appeared in my hands, though I had not taken it with me. Its pages flipped to a new verse, each word glistening as if written in fresh blood. Missa mortuorum, the mass of the dead. My chest wound burned. The choir knelt. The altar's surface rippled, and from within it, I swore I saw something vast and watching, waiting to be fed. Miriam's voice echoed faintly from above, desperate and terrified. Elias, if you read that prayer, they'll crown you their priest. I looked down at the Psalter, and God forgive me, I almost wanted to. Episode 10. The Crown of Shadows. The dead knelt as one, their hollow faces turned toward me, their empty sockets filled with a strange, dreadful reverence. And in that silence deeper than any tomb, Brother Matthias stepped forward, carrying it, the crown. It was not gold, it was not holy, it was made of bone and dried sinew, bound together with threads of blood that pulsed faintly, as if the crown itself still lived. Kneel, Elias, Matthias rasped, his voice a grave spilling open. You are chosen. I didn't move. My fingers trembled over the Psalter, but I couldn't turn away. The altar behind them throbbed like a heart in the dark, its surface glistening with fresh blood. Miriam's voice, faint and desperate, echoed from the chapel above. Don't let them crown you, Elias. If you accept it, you won't belong to God anymore. But the choir of the dead, they sang. Their song was low, a sound like the earth humming in its sleep, and every note pulled at my chest wound. The blood in me answered their hymn, whispering one word over and over. Yes. Matthias placed the crown in his skeletal hands, lifting it high as if in mockery of a blessing. The black candles bent toward it, their flames writhing in worship. Wear it, Elias, he said, and the altar will open for you. The psalms will no longer bleed, they will obey. My breath came ragged. I looked at the crown, and I wanted it. God help me, I wanted it. The wound in my chest pulsed once, sharp and commanding. My knees buckled, but before I could fall, Miriam's voice cut through the darkness, trembling but defiant. If you take it, you'll never come back. Not even your soul will know your name. For a moment, I hesitated, and in that moment, the crown moved. The threads of blood writhed, snaking out toward me like they could smell what I'd already given. The choir roared in approval. I should have run. I should have prayed. Instead, I let them place it on my head. The instant the crown touched me, the world split open. The altar bled rivers. The dead sang until their voices broke, their hymn louder than thunder. And in the pit of that unholy cathedral, I heard something laughing. Not the dead, not the altar, something deeper. And it knew my name. Episode 11. The sun that devours God. The crown had not left my head. I could feel it, its bony edges burrowing into my skull, threads of living blood pulsing in time with my heart. Every beat whispered a single truth. You are no longer theirs. You are ours. When I opened the Psalter, the pages no longer turned with my hands to obey my thoughts. The ink bled upward like veins, and the letters twisted into a verse I had never seen before. Canticum quod diem devoret, the psalm that devours God. The dead choir fell silent. Even Matthias, who had guided me this far, recoiled. His hollow sockets trembled with something I thought the dead had long forgotten. Fear. Elias toned. His voice cracked like ancient wood. That hymn was never meant for tongues made of flesh, but the altar wanted it. I could feel it thrumming beneath my feet. Alive, eager, demanding. Miriam's voice came from above, muffled, trembling. If you sing that, Elias, you won't be praying anymore. You'll be feeding it. I looked down at the Psalter. The letters bled brighter, and I could hear theme each word a hunger, each syllable a wound in the sky. And then I sang. The first note wasn't mine. It came from somewhere deep, something beneath the earth that used my voice like a borrowed knife. The sound tore through the air, sharp enough to make the candles gutter black and the walls bleed scripture. The choir joined in. Their song was thunder in a grave, a hymn without beginning or end. Shadows writhed across the cathedral walls like they wanted to crawl free. And then it happened. The altar opened, not downward this time, upward. The ceiling tore like old cloth, and through it, I saw something vast wings made of ash, a face that burned brighter than fire and darker than night. It wasn't God. It wasn't anything holy, but it listened. The song wanted to drag it down, and for a moment, I wanted to help it. Elias, Miriam screamed, her voice breaking from above. Stop singing before it takes the sky with it. But I couldn't stop, because as the final verse bloomed in my throat, I saw the altar smile, and it was smiling with my mouth. Episode 12, The Godless Benediction. The sky never closed. Where the chapel's roof had once been, there was only abs black and endless, filled with winds of ash and a silence that could crush prayers before they left your lips. I knelt at the altar, the crown of bone digging deeper into my skull. Blood dripped down my face, but it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to it. The psalter pulsed in my hands, its pages alive, its words no longer written in ink but in veins. A new verse appeared, trembling like it wanted to be spoken. Benedictio sine Dio, the godless benediction. Miriam's voice cracked from above, trembling through the ruined chapel. Elias, don't read it. If you bless them without God, there's no undoing it. But I was no longer sure God was listening. The dead gathered around, hundreds now, maybe thousands, their fleshless hands lifted in reverence, their empty sockets fixed on me. They didn't pray, they waited. Matthias knelt closest. Speak it, Elias. In the silence, give them their mass. I opened my mouth, and the words crawled out like worms. Blessed are the hollow, for they shall be filled. The walls groaned, candles shattered. Blessed are the forsaken, for they shall inherit the altar. The floor split wide, veins of red light crawling through the stone, connecting the dead to me, and me to something deeper than death. Miriam screamed, stop, but her voice was already distant, fading, as though I stood in a different world. The final line bled onto the page, shaking with hunger. Blessed is the one who bleeds for all, for it shall reign. I spoke it, the dead roared it with sound, but with silence so vast it drowned my heart. Their mouths opened, and black light poured out, rising toward the abyss above, and the thing in the sky bent closer. It had no eyes, no mouth, only a shape too large for thought, but I felt it watching me, approving. The altar's blood boiled, the crown tightened, and as the last syllable left my lips, I realized the truth. I hadn't been leading the mass had been leading me, and somewhere above that abyss, something far older than God whispered, now, Elias, anoint them all. Episode 13, The Altar That Breathes. The first breath nearly tore the chapel apart. It came from the altar deep and guttural, as if the stone itself had grown months. Dust rained from the ceiling. The dead didn't flinch. They only bowed lower, as though this was the moment they'd been waiting for. I clutched the psalter, but it no longer felt like a book. It was warm, throbbing, as if I were holding a heart ripped straight from some holy thing and forced to keep it alive. Elias, Miriam's voice was hoarse from above, faint but desperate. Get away from it before it swallows you too. But I didn't move. I couldn't. The altar exhaled. A wave of hot, copper-tasting air hit me. The candles bent backward, flames stretching as though drawn toward its breath. Then I heard it tribs cracking. Not mine, not the dead's. The sound came from the walls, from the floor, from the cathedral itself. And then, with a sickening groan, the altar expanded. Stone split, veins bulged beneath its surface, pumping dark blood that pooled at my feet. The psalter turned its pages without my hands, faster and faster until it stopped at words carved in flesh instead of ink. Respira Ecclesia. The church breathes. Matthias knelt, skeletal hands raised in worship. It lives because of you, Elias. Feed it, give it the final psalm. I staggered backward, but the crown of bone tightened, rooting me in place. My chest wound burned like fire. The dead began to chant, low at first, then louder, until their voices shook the ground. The altar inhaled again, and the blood around it was drawn upward, into its cracks, as if the church were drinking. Miriam's scream cut through the chanting. If you read that psalm, it won't stop with this place. It will breathe until it devours the sky. I stared at the psalter, and it stared back. The words on the page pulsed with each breath of the altar. I didn't read them. they read me, and in that moment, I knew if I spoke the verse, the church would no longer be a church. It would be a mouth, and it would never close. My lips trembled. Elias, Matthias whispered, his voice colder than the grave. It has waited centuries. Give it its first hymn, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if the thing breathing beneath me was a church, or if it was God learning how to hunger. Episode 14. The Benediction of Flesh. The otter's breath turned into a howl. The walls stretched like skin over bone, veins crawling across the stone, glowing faintly as if fire burned beneath them. Every candle in the underground cathedral went black at once, but the darkness wasn't empty, it moved. The church was alive, and it was starving. Elias, Miriam's voice trembled from above, cracking like broken glass. If you don't stop it now, there won't be anything left to save. The Psalter throbbed in my hands. A new verse bled across its pages, each word twitching like a muscle in spasm. Benedictio carnis, the benediction of flesh. Matthias knelt before me, grinning with a mouth that had no lips. You know what it asks for. Blood built this altar. Blood must bless it. The crown tightened on my skull until I thought it would pierce bone. My chest wound burned, each pulse of pain dragging me closer to the altar, as if I were prey and it was the predator. I looked at the dead. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. They only waited, their hunger not their own. But the altars, Elias, Miriam's voice cracked again, softer this time, pleading, if you bleed for it, you'll become part of it. And maybe that was the point. The Psalter opened by itself. The words weren't just written anymore, they screamed. Bleed, Elias, feed it. The altar inhaled, and the air turned heavy. My knees hit the stone floor. I raised my hand, trembling, my fingers hovering over my chest wound. Matthias leaned closer, his voice a rattle of dust. One cut, one offering, and the church will be yours. But then another sound, faint, from somewhere deep above. A bell, that chapel bell. I frowned. See, that bell had rung since the night this nightmare began. Miriam shouted, Elias, don't listen to Ivran. But it was too late. The altar shuddered with something almost like laughter, and its veins split wide, revealing a mouth beneath the stone, lined with teeth made of broken scripture. I raised the Psalter, and for one terrible moment, I wondered if I was about to bless the world, or feed it to something older than God. Episode 15. The Mass that never ends. The bell did not stop ringing. Each toll was heavier than the last, shaking the cathedral until the stones wept blood. The altar's mouth yawned wider, its jagged teeth grinding scripture into dust. The crown of bone on my head tightened, roots of blood digging deep into my skull, and I understood. This was not a warning, it was a summons. Elias, Miriam's voice split the darkness, raw and desperate. Fight it, please, before you're gone. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. I was becoming. The Psalter opened on its own. The words did not simply bleed, now they bled upward, twisting into the air like veins searching for a heart. Missa Perpetua, the Mass that never ends. The dead knelt in perfect silence, their eyeless faces lifted in rapture. Matthias, skeletal and proud, raised his arms toward me. Lead it, Elias. The world is your congregation now. The altar inhaled, and I felt the pull in my chest like it wanted my soul first, then everything else. And then I sang. The first note was mine. The second was not. By the third, I no longer knew which voice belonged to me. The sound filled the cathedral, bled into the earth, and climbed toward the black sky above. The bell rang in time with a hymn. The dead joined me. Every word I spoke was a command, and every command carved new scripture into the walls. The cathedral walls cracked, but instead of crumbling, they grew, stretching outward, flesh and stone weaving together. And beyond the ruins of the chapel, the world answered. Churches, monasteries, forgotten shrines, one by one, their bells began to toll in unison. Every altar bled, every psalm turned to hunger. Miriam's scream cut through it all. Elias, if you finish it, there won't be a heaven left. I turned toward her voice, trembling, but I didn't stop singing, because in that moment, I realized the terrible truth. I wasn't ending the world, I was remaking it. The altar exhaled, and for the first time, it spoke. Amen. The cathedral erupted in black light, flooding the earth like a second creation. The sky split, the bells never stopped, And the Mass still hasn't ended.
Epilogue, the psalm that waits for you. The bells are silent now. Not because they've stopped, but because you've grown used to them. That deep, bone-shaking tolling has slipped beneath the sound of your thoughts, hiding there like a shadow you can't name. You tell yourself you're safe, that the altar is only a story, that the psalms can't find you if you don't look for them. And yet, tonight, as you sit alone, there it is. A page. It wasn't there before, torn, yellowed, edges blackened like it had been pulled from fire. There's no title, no chapter, only one line written in something that isn't ink. Sing, and the altar will hear you. The lights flicker. For the briefest moment, you smell it, blood on stone, incense rotting in the cold air, and a voice that does not come from this world. Elias. No, closer. It's whispering your name. And if you listen, really listen, you'll hear the bells again. Slow, patient, calling you to kneel. The psalm isn't finished. It never was. And maybe, if you read the words out loud, if you let them pass your lips the way Elias did, the altar will open for you too. Go on. The page is waiting. And somewhere in the dark, the Mass begins again.